Good evening, I'm Klaudia Czerwińska and you're watching World News Tonight live from Warsaw. After a bumpy start, Fredrich Merz was finally chosen as the next Chancellor of the German Federation. And yet a wobbly victory is a cause for concern to the newly formed coalition, as the need to orchestrate a second vote showed cracks in the internal structures. We'll have more on that in just a moment, but first, the latest headlines. Cybersecurity concerns as Poland continues to be the target of Russian interferences ahead of the presidential elections. European Union introduces a guideline for member states to drop Russian gas and oil by 2027. The first round of presidential elections in Poland is on May 18th. We will tell you how to register to vote abroad. This was a true political earthquake in Berlin. What was meant to be business as usual turned out to flip the future of the new German coalition on its back. Fredrich Merz unexpectedly fell short of a majority in a parliament vote to become German Chancellor on Tuesday in the first vote. During the second round of voting, Merz scored a wobbly victory with 325 out of 328 votes. Is this a clear sign of the coalition showing weakness in its infancy? Sasha Farbach has more in his original report.
The day in the German parliament started with optimism, expected to be a mere formality cementing the new coalition. Friedrich Merz was set to be officially voted in as the new chancellor. Then the shock hit.
Zum Bundeskanzler der Bundesrepublik Deutschland nicht gewählt.
Friedrich Merz fell 6 votes short of the 316 needed to become chancellor, despite a coalition of 328 seats. With a two-thirds majority backing a second vote, intense political wrangling followed.
This is unprecedented on the federal level. And it's happening in a situation in which Merz is anyway starting his chancellorship under difficult circumstances.
Article 63 of Germany's constitution allowed for another round within 2 weeks, and after some twists, Merz secured 325 votes and clinched the chancellery. However, experts warn that the coalition's divisions have been laid bare.
Merz is heavily damaged. Also Klingbeil, by the way. It's not just the CDU and CSU that are damaged here, but also the SPD. The point is, we will never know who voted against Merz or didn't vote for him. The effect is that he is weakened domestically, that he is also weakened, and Germany is weakened in terms of its European partners.
Chancellor Merz may have stumbled out of the gate, but now faces the tough task of reassessing both his own ranks and his coalition. Experts suggest his plans could require major revisions moving forward.
It is a frustration with Merz giving up the debt brake, the planned debts, which will finance investments, including the security and defense infrastructure. Or perhaps it was the rebelling SPD against Merz's strong stance on migration, social security cuts.
Despite today's setback, Germany is set to have a new chancellor, with key trips to Paris and Warsaw lined up for Wednesday. But today's events have exposed a shaky start for the coalition. How Chancellor Merz will recover remains to be seen. Sasha Farbach, TVP World.
The domestic political crisis in Romania continues after an unsurprising victory of far-right George Simion in the first round of a presidential election rerun and the resignation of the Social Democrat Prime Minister Marcel Ciolacu. The country is due to encounter an even greater political shift. The withdrawal of the Social Democrats means the new government will be formed after the new president is elected. What's next for Romania, and is the country going to head in a right-wing direction? Paweł Trzaskowski, our Balkan correspondent, has more in his latest report.
Ilie Bolozan, Romania's interim president, has nominated the new interim prime minister, Cătălin Predoiu. Previously Romania's Minister of the Interior, Predoiu will be filling in for Marcel Ciolacu, who resigned from the post of the prime minister on Monday following the results of the first round of presidential elections.
Having no credibility after the vote of the Romanians, I will propose to my colleagues that the Social Democratic Party leave this coalition. If my colleagues vote to leave the coalition, I will, of course, as the coalition's Prime Minister, submit my resignation.
Ciolacu was the Prime Minister of the Big Tent coalition of Social Democrats and National Liberals formed after the December parliamentary elections. Their candidate, Crin Antonescu, failed to make it to the second round of the presidential vote.
The votes have spoken, the citizens have spoken. I'm sorry.
The withdrawal of Social Democrats means the new government will be formed once the new president is finally elected. Some experts predict that this parliament will eventually produce a minority government and that with the withdrawal, the Social Democrats, PSD, are preparing to move to the opposition.
PSD understands the mathematics in parliament and they state, of course, we will be in the opposition, but endorsing or backing a minority government.
And the shape of the new government will depend on the result of the second round of the presidential election, in which hard-right George Simion will face centrist Nicușor Dan. In the first round, Dan received half as many votes as Simion, and closing this gap will be a major challenge.
If we would have a huge voting presence in terms of above 60% threshold, he has a chance. If the voting presence for round 2 is below the 65% threshold, he has very slim to even none chances to win elections.
In Romania, the president represents the country in international relations, commands the armed forces and nominates the prime minister. Therefore, the choice Romanians make in the second round on May 18th will not only determine the country's head of state, but the future shape of the parliament. Paweł Trzaskowski for TVP World.
The EU handed down a roadmap to get member states to kick their cheap Russian gas and oil habits by 2027, according to a roadmap handed down on Tuesday. The proposal has been hailed by Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk as well as Ukrainian ambassador to the EU, Chancellor, who are both confident the plan will slow Russia's war machine in Ukraine. Our EU correspondent, Angela Skujins, has more on this breaking story from Brussels.
The European Commission has published a roadmap on Tuesday showing member states how they can get rid of Russian oil and gas by 2027. Now, a legal mechanism sits at the core of this proposal, a force majeure allowing those countries to opt out of these pricey contracts without having to pay hefty fines. The EU Commissioner for Energy, Dan Jorgensen, said the proposal will help support Ukraine as it battles another year of Russian invasion.
No more will we permit Russia to weaponize energy against us. No more will we allow our member states to be blackmailed. No more will we indirectly help fill up the war chest in Kremlin.
The move has been celebrated by leaders from across the continent, including Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, who pointed out on social media.
We have it. Thanks to the actions of the Polish presidency, the European Commission has today published a roadmap to completely end all fuel imports from Russia to the EU.
The Ukrainian ambassador to the EU, Chancellor, also told TVP World that he celebrates this plan as it will halt Russia as it uses these profits from energy to benefit on the battlefield.
Russia could have bought 2,400 F-35 if it had decided to use the money it earned from this energy trade since February 2022.
TVP World also spoke to the former Energy Commissioner Andrus Piebalgs, who said that despite pushback from certain member states such as Slovakia and Hungary, he expects broad support for this measure and for the EU to stop footing the bill that Russia brings on Ukraine through the attacks on that energy infrastructure.
The EU is all the time helping to restore power supply, medical supply in Ukraine, and that is quite not logical that you pay for the aggressor really to do damage and then repair the damage.
Now, the proposal requires support from the European Parliament and those member states in the European Council. We're also expecting a range of legislative files to be proposed to bolster this effort. Until then, we'll have to wait and see whether the EU can cook without Russian oil and gas. Angela Skujins from Brussels for TVP World.
Drones, artificial intelligence, modern technologies, investments in startups are just some of the capabilities which Poland will seek to boost in the short term, stated Polish Defense Minister Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz during the Defense 24-day Security Conference in Warsaw. The move comes at a time when Latvia's intelligence reports that Russia is stepping up provocations in the Baltic Sea region following NATO expansion to include Sweden and Finland. Zuzanna Jurek has this report.
An integrated threat against us and our allies. What should be done? First, a strong army, a strong society, and strong alliances.
During his speech at the Security Conference Defense 24 Days held in Warsaw, the Polish Minister of Defense underlined some of the key gaps in production capabilities which need to be closed in the short term.
Drones, artificial intelligence, modern technologies, investments in startups, simplification of administrative procedures, quick decisions at key and strategic points.
As for the sums and timelines, experts believe that decisive action will be of the essence.
Mr. Kosiniak-Kamysz mentioned 26 billion zloty. That money makes the difference, even if this is just one-off, not a constant money provided to the system.
However, apart from addressing Poland's national security needs, Kosiniak-Kamysz also underlines some of the key challenges faced by the Baltic Sea region, where NATO members sit within the immediate geographic vicinity of Russia.
That is why the Baltic Sea is seriously under threat. The loss of communication capabilities at times due to cut cables, the protection of critical infrastructure, all of this required the creation of a new operation in the Baltic, which Poland initiated. Baltic Guard patrols, the designation of units.
The threat level was underlined on Tuesday when Latvian military intelligence reported that provocations by Russia have increased significantly in the Baltic Sea recently. These included airspace violation and aggressive approaches to aircraft and ships from NATO countries. Experts believe that all of these will require more robust approaches.
How to adapt the law of the sea in order to be more effective in stopping and preventing these kind of actions.
These considerations come at a time when the EU is also moving to close critical capability gaps. In order to address these, the Rearm Europe Fund was introduced to free up the capital to support these developments. It is expected that as early as the end of the year, member states could receive their first loans to support the military build-up. For TVP World, Zuzanna Jurek.
Disinformation campaigns and hybrid attacks are now the order of the day in Poland as the country is facing an unprecedented number of attempted interferences orchestrated by the Russian Federation. This is a particular cause for concern as Polish presidential elections are nearing, creating a high-stakes opportunity for Moscow to try and interfere with the domestic affairs of Poland. Kazimierz Łysiak has more in his report.
In less than 2 weeks, Poles will be casting their votes in the first round of a crucial presidential election. And with important European elections comes Russian meddling.
During the ongoing presidential election, we have been facing an unprecedented attempt at interference by the Russian Federation. This is not an attack aimed at any single electoral committee. It is an assault on all of them. These actions are part of a coordinated effort combining disinformation campaigns with hybrid attacks on Poland's critical infrastructure.
These hybrid attacks include acts of arson, like in the case of the Marywilska 44 shopping mall in Warsaw. Lithuanian state prosecutors confirmed in March that the Russian military intelligence agency GRU was behind that incident. But these attempts are not only limited to physical acts of sabotage.
Poland is the most targeted country in the European Union. In 2024 alone, over 600,000 cyber incidents were reported, with more than 100,000 of them deemed serious enough to warrant intervention by Polish national services across various sectors.
According to the latest study by a German think tank, artificial intelligence is one of the most effective tools used to spread misinformation.
Last-minute deepfakes, videos designed to misrepresent political candidates, such as fabricating statements or actions released within the last 48 hours before the election.
The Polish Digital Affairs Ministry says it is tackling these misinformation tactics on a daily basis. It is also warning Polish citizens to double-check everything found on the internet to avoid being manipulated by Russian hybrid tactics. For TVP World, I'm Kazimierz Łysiak.
This is a political storm of his own making. The leading right-wing candidate Karol Nawrocki is in hot water only 2 weeks ahead of the Polish presidential elections, as details have surfaced regarding his ownership of a real estate property that not only contradicts his past statements, but also involves an alleged extortion of an elderly man. Our chief political correspondent, Aaron Damon, has more on this curious story.
He's the right-wing's leading candidate in this month's presidential election. But the Eurosceptic Karol Nawrocki, who's been imitating Donald Trump's rallying against the old world order, is trying to wave off a political storm. Just over a week out from the first round of voting.
Mike Tyson once said, everyone's got a plan until somebody punches them in the face. And, you know, that sort of captures the essence of that. I'm sure Karol Nawrocki would like that one, actually, as a very proficient boxer.
At the heart of it, a small flat in the seaside city of Gdansk on the Baltic coast, and an election debate misstep.
I am speaking on behalf of regular Poles, just like me, who have only one apartment.
Reports later emerging that Nawrocki in fact has 2 places legally registered to his name. Then revelations that the second apartment was picked up from an 80-year-old man named Jerzy in exchange for his support and care. Nawrocki, who's endorsed by the opposition right-wing Law and Justice Party, insisted on Tuesday that he kept his side of the bargain, but lost track of Jerzy last year.
He did in fact live very modestly, and that's why he needed help from a person like me already since 2011. I always provided him with the help when it was needed.
Media have found the elderly man now living at a state care home in Gdansk, with Nawrocki accepting that at some point he was unable to keep delivering support. At the same time, a former carer has alleged she previously had to pay for Jerzy's power bills as he was freezing in Nawrocki's flat.
It's neither my role nor the government's role to evaluate the actions of presidential candidates. However, this whole issue strongly reminds us of a problem that the Ombudsman has raised many times before. That is, the large scale of frauds and scams, where elderly people in difficult financial situations become victims.
Even far-right presidential candidate Sławomir Mencen, who's currently polling in 3rd place, has directly hit out at Nawrocki for the first time in the campaign, calling him a liar.
With election campaigns, it's about controlling narratives, and, you know, even if somebody's in the right or in the wrong, and his supporters think he's in the right, his opponent thinks he's in the wrong. If wherever you are on that, if you lose control of the narrative, then you're in big trouble, basically, and that's exactly what's happened to the Nawrocki campaign over the last 2 days.
According to numbers out earlier this week, Nawrocki and centrist frontrunner Rafał Trzaskowski remain on track to finish as the top 2 in the May 18 vote, with a final runoff expected on June 1st. Aaron Damon, TVP World.
511 polling stations across the world. This is how many places Poles will be able to cast their votes in the upcoming presidential elections scheduled for May 18th. During a press conference, Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski encouraged Poles living abroad to exercise their constitutional right. But how should one get ready to vote abroad? Ovidiusz Nicieja had an in-depth look into the process and has more details in his next report.
Those who wish to vote in the Polish presidential elections from abroad have the chance to do so in as many as 511 polling stations, which are located in various places all across the world. The Polish foreign minister has held a press conference in which he has encouraged everyone to take part in these elections, regardless whether they live in Poland or abroad, as their vote counts just the same, and they have just as much say in who should be Poland's next president.
I want to call on all Polish people living abroad, our citizens, those eligible to take part in the upcoming presidential election. Your vote counts exactly the same as a vote cast in Poland. A couple 100,000 votes can really impact the result of this election. It's worth it to feel the weight of your vote, also through voting abroad. Now, to be able to vote abroad, you need to file an application. It can be done online. It takes about 2 minutes. The deadline is May 13. The elections are on May 18. You can also mail it in a traditional way, or you can also obtain a certificate of the right to vote. You can do it in any Polish consulate. However, the recommended way to file an application is online. You can find all of the relevant information on the webpage of the Polish Foreign Ministry, all of the deadlines, all of the documents you need to be able to vote in the Polish presidential elections. From Warsaw for TVP World, Ovidiusz Nicieja.
This was supposed to be a day of jubilation and a new beginning. Business as usual. The vote was expected to see Fredrich Merz, leader of the center-right Christian Democratic Alliance, become the next German Chancellor. But it did not happen at first. Later during the day, another vote took place, leading to a wobbly victory, but still a victory for Fredrich Merz. Daniela Schwarzer, executive board member at the Bertelsmann Stiftung, joins me now to talk about the repercussions that Tuesday events will have on Germany and the EU. Thank you for joining on the program. Great to see you back.
Good evening.
So Merz was not chosen in the first vote. What do you think? What signal does it send about the coalition?
Well, it showed clearly that probably both the Christian Democrats and the Social Democrats leadership did not work their parliamentary groups enough to get the full backing. We don't know of which party the no votes, from which parties the no votes came from, but it shows clearly that probably in both, because there were so many, 18 votes were missing in the first go, that both parties didn't fully support the Chancellor. And of course, it also gave a lot of room for the opposition, even on that very first day of Fredrich Merz going into his office, to discuss certain issues. The far right clearly criticized him and the whole coalition in the second round of parliamentary vote, because there were speeches to be held by all parties present in parliament. So it was a very political day, and it was exploited by the opposition for different goals. And the two coalition partners had to clearly show that they have a plan how to handle this first crisis, which was unexpected. And in the end, they did. And now government ministers are being sworn in as we speak.
So what do you think was the reason for Merz not achieving the required majority in the first vote? I mean, was this a sign of disapproval for the shape of the new government, or were there some other reasons? Is this a rebellion within the ranks, or perhaps the SPD was responsible?
There are potentially three reasons. One is about the candidate for the chancellery, who is now the Chancellor, Fredrich Merz himself. He is a person that has been criticized for his style, for his way of running the party, and also the way he has been shaping up this government, which shows that he wants to exert a very strong top-down leadership. And so did his Social Democrat partner Lars Klingbeil over the past weeks, choosing people into the government that no one expected and leaving others out who have been, long-standing leading politicians of the Social Democratic Party. So that may have played a role. Then some may have not been in agreement with the actual policies that the coalition treaty stands for. For instance, the Young Social Democrats called on their members when the treaty was supposed to be voted on by all Social Democratic Party members to not grant their support. So there was also substantive criticism. And I suppose the third element was really what has happened over the past weeks since the elections in December, because there have been two incidences where the new political leadership actually did very unconventional things. Once Fredrich Merz tried to get laws passed through the old parliament on migration, getting backing from the far right. He didn't succeed, but that clearly showed that he is ready to do things that are unexpected and that really some of even his party friends disapprove of. And then secondly, the change of our constitution, again with the old parliament, orchestrated by the two new coalition partners in order to create space for Germany to spend more on defense in this case, Also, that was disapproved by some of his party colleagues. And so I think those three reasons probably explain why in the first round, a number of MPs said, well, we would like to send a warning shot to the new Chancellor and the new leadership that some of the things that happened over the past weeks are not really acceptable.
So do you think that Merz still can be seen as an authoritative figure after having his potential position contested? Because the first vote did not see him clearly as the Chancellor. Another one had to happen.
Yes, and of course that was a real blow, and there was a lot of interpretation going on all day. Some said this was a failure, others said this was just an obstacle on the way. With regards to the perception of the strength with which Fredrich Merz gets into the office, of course, I guess most observers would argue tonight that he is weakened because of this obstacle that got into his way. But it is also interesting to see how quickly he decided to handle the situation in the way he did, because after all, he got a positive vote just after 4 p.m. this afternoon, and the first vote failed at 10 a.m., so roughly 6 hours in between the two. And that's not a very long time to handle a political crisis, which evolved this morning. And he did have the courage to say, I want this solved today. I think that was a very smart decision, because if he had created more space for interpretation of weakness, of more space for the opposition to criticize him, more space for party members and parliamentarians to question their leadership, I think that would have been more harmful. So he did show an ability to handle the crisis and to move comparatively quickly.
And what do you think will be the repercussions and effects that this repeated vote that had to take place for a new Chancellor to be elected, will have on Central and Eastern European countries, as well as for Europe as a whole?
Well, first of all, I think he will stick to his plans, and those plans are very important, I think, from a Central and Eastern European perspective, with regards to bringing Germany forward in terms of economic competitiveness, in terms of defense, but also in terms of rebuilding closer ties with European friends and partners. And tomorrow, his first full day in office, he has said he would travel to Paris to see Emmanuel Macron, the French president, and he would also travel to Warsaw to meet with the Polish Prime Minister, Donald Tusk. And I think that combination has a strong signaling function that Germany cares about its neighbors. It wants to work with both more closely, invests early on into stronger bilateral relations, and then also maybe, we'll hear more about that tomorrow, whether he takes this from the bilateral relationship straight to the European level, either in a Weimar Triangle format, so Paris, Warsaw, Berlin, or even in an EU dimension that he emphasizes when he speaks tomorrow, how important it is to take certain initiatives in the European Union.
We're coming to an end.
There's no lasting... Yes.
We're sadly coming to an end, but I just wanted to ask you a final question. Politico said today that pessimism, I quote, is a German national sport, but the new Chancellor will be determined to prove his compatriots wrong. Does he have enough willpower now and authority to spring Germany into action?
It really depends on the first days, I think. He has the chance now to turn around that situation, which still looked pretty grim this morning. He has already taken a major step this afternoon. And now it is really about showing his voters that he is ready to deliver. That was really his mantra. He said he wants to take quick decisions at the beginning of his term. He wants to move quickly. And I do think that, the international trip that he takes on his first day, and he will probably have messages to share that are very relevant also for Germany on certain issues that occupy us, like defense questions and moving ahead on Ukraine, the migration question, all these issues. He can possibly bring home messages in the first week even, and that will determine how he is seen by German voters.
Thank you so much. Daniela Schwarzer, Executive Board Member at the Bertelsmann Stiftung, was joining me now on the program. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
And so this would be all for now here on World News Tonight, but please do stay tuned. We're back in just a moment with more news and features, and we'll see you there.